Hello and welcome to my presentation about errors. Now, the intended audience for this is students doing VCE Computing Units 1 and 2 and VCE Software Development, which is Units 3 and 4. So it doesn't cover every situation for every errors, but it does talk about what's in the study design. So our learning intention is that students will be able to identify the specified error types, and we would start off by talking about what error types we already know. I actually confess for a long time I didn't really know about different error types. I just knew that sometimes it worked and sometimes it didn't, but I didn't really think terribly much about the categories that they fitted into, although when I was programming in a language called BASIC in the 1980s, I remember that syntax errors seem to be everywhere. I seem to dread those. So the study design says types of errors including syntax errors, as just mentioned, logic errors and runtime errors, which also have those categories we're going to be having a look at. I think of runtime ones as they will actually make the program crash. So a syntax error will often just mean that it won't load, whereas with a runtime error, it will load, then at some point it will crash. I'm sure that's not 100% true. So what's a syntax error? Well, it's an error in a code that prevents a solution from being compiled and or executed as a result of the syntax not being followed correctly. It's probably worth mentioning that some languages are interpreted, which means you write the code and when you run it on the spot, it turns it into code that it understands. I think machine code, but maybe it's not always machine code. And then it runs it, and there's compiled languages where you actually compile it, you turn the code that you wrote into a program, and then you run the program separately. So the program that you're running actually doesn't have your original code in it. It's been turned into something that the computer can read. But either way, a syntax error will kill one of these processes because it just doesn't know what it is that you're talking about. So, for example, here's a bit of Python. Now, you can actually mess up Python by having the wrong indents, but that's not what I've done here. So I'll stop talking for a tick so you can see if you can determine what the syntax error is here. Actually, I'll tell you what syntax error I see really commonly, particularly with Year 7 and 8 students, is that they don't understand that it's case specific. So they'll write print as a capital P, and it won't work because it doesn't recognise it as that keyword. But in this particular case, it's the missing bracket there. So we've opened our bracket there, and it's not closed there, so that's a syntax error. A logic error is a problem with the code that results in the solution generating the incorrect output with calculations and conditions and so forth just because you've got the flow of logic wrong. There's actually nothing wrong with the program as such, it's just that the thinking is muddled. So, for example, have a look at this one and see if you can work out what's wrong with the logic of this. I actually couldn't to start with. The problem with the logic of this, because this is a perfectly good program, but if I were to run this code down the bottom, which you might have just done in your head, it would actually tell you that the price was, let's see, so we've got a discount of $2,000. So the price is minus $1,800. It's because the discount is as an integer, and to times it we actually need to turn it into a decimal fraction. So we would need to, probably on line 2, say the discount percent equals discount percent divided by 100, so that we've actually got the working number. So there's nothing wrong with the code, it just doesn't do the job that we want it to do. Runtime errors, my least favourite of all. I always feel very perplexed by these. These happen while the program is running and will cause it to crash. This is one reason why we do validation, so that we can have we can avoid one of these types of errors. And so there is the overflow error, the out of index range, which I have to say I make happen much more often than I would like to. The type mismatch, I make that happen, and divide by 0, I had a very foolish incident with that. So, an overflow is just an operation that attempts to create a numeric value that's bigger than what the language or the computer can handle. We have integer flows, we have floating point overflows, we have a stack overflow. Now I don't really understand what a stack overflow is, but I do know the site Stack Overflow, which is a fantastic place to get help from coding professionals. And a buffer overflow, and I've heard of that, but I'd be lying if I said I deeply understood it. So this bit of code is actually very clever. This is some Python, and it imports this sys library, and it gets it to return the largest number, and then it tries to make this thing called result, which is the maximum number plus 1, and it will return an error. Now, this program will actually run without crashing because they're using a try here. A try is quite a good way of dealing with something that you think might produce a runtime error, but be careful, because if you in fact express the thing wrong, it will try and fail, not because it failed the test, but because you wrote the test badly. So you might have a syntax error hiding in there if you're using a try. There's the index out of range error. I actually have to say I make this one reasonably often. Basically, it's attempting to get an item out of an array, and because they start at 0, 1, 2, 3 and so forth, and they're asking for something that actually doesn't have that index. Commonly, so if you've got an index of 4, I actually think this is a good one here. So that's index 0, 1 and 2, and then if you try and print my list 5, well, that's going to fail too, because there is no such thing as 5. It's simply out of the range, which is why I have this woman looking for a book in a spot where there are no books. Type mismatch. I have to say I'm a shocker for this one too. Basically, you're trying to get it to do something with two different types of data, and it doesn't want to do it with those. Famously between strings and integers, but there are other types of mismatches. So here, where in fact result equals 5 plus 3, well, 5 is actually expressed as a string there, and 3 is an integer, so that will produce a type mismatch error. Divide by 0. I had this great scheme on the school's coffee shop app, and it would rate how you were doing, or something like what your last 5 coffees were or something, but I was dividing the ratings by, I think I was dividing it by the last 5 ratings. And so when there were no ratings in the last certain number of purchases, it was trying to divide it by the number of ratings, which is 0. And being PHP, it just killed that part of the site. So that wasn't at all graceful, and that really should have known better. It's one of those things. It's a logic problem that I hadn't thought through. What if there's no data to handle here? You can't divide by 0. The freaks computers out. Freaks mathematicians out. Don't do it. It's not nice to them. We should be kind to mathematicians. Okay. We have 10 questions. If you don't want to do these, perfectly fine. I'm going to go through them. I've said everything new that I'm going to say. Student writes a Python program to calculate the average of the test scores. There we go. 4 test scores. Average is that divided by 0. Crashes when run. Pretty obvious there. You probably heard it when I said it. It's a divided by 0. Creates a loop to display the first 5 elements of a list, but there's only 3 elements in the list. So that's an out of range, which it actually won't get to until it actually tries to call on it. So it will work for a while, and then it'll crash. This one here, I'll stop for a tick to give you a chance. This one here is a type mismatch error because discount is expressed as a string and price is an integer. And when you try and do the maths with those, it won't work. This one here, I actually had to look over this twice. This is actually just a logic problem. There's nothing wrong with this code. It just doesn't do what it's meant to do, and that's because somebody mistakenly put in the pass score as greater than 40. Okay, let's have a look. Temperature is 32. If temperature is greater than 30, print it's hot today. Again, I had to have a bit of a second look at this. It's important that this is in Python, because in Python that would have the semicolon, or not the full colon, on that line there, which is subs in for the word then. Program is calculating factorial values and stores result as an 8-bit unsigned integer, which has a maximum value of 255. And when calculating the factors of 6, or the factorial of 6, I think that's how I say that, which is 720, it shows another number instead. It's because it's working outside the range, and you've freaked it out and confused it. So that's a... oh goodness, I've got this in my head. I just can't bring it to the tip of my tongue. Let me have a look over here on my other screen, and I'll see the It's an overflow error. I don't know why I couldn't remember that. Calculate the percentage of correct answers. And they thought it should be, they got 5 questions right, and so they're expecting a score of 50%. Well, this is just a logic error. They actually just put in the wrong information. They write this code, num1, num2, result equals num1 times num2 plus 3. Well, that's pretty easy. That's a syntax error. They forgot to close off the brackets on the third line. Okay, we've got students in an array, or a list if you're thinking in Python speak. Student number equals 3, and we're printing the number of student 3. Now, again, this is a pretty common mistake. You might think, well, number 3 is Charlie. Actually, Alice is 0, Bob is 1, Charlie is 2. There is no 3. This is an index out of range. Now, we are calculating the speed. I think we're very close to the end. So, distance is 100. We're entering the time, and we're calculating it. Now, you actually have to have a bit of a knowledge of how Python works to understand where this one's at. But I guess Python's pretty common in schools. This input here is going to be collecting, unless we tell it otherwise, it's going to be collecting a string. So when we try and do this maths here, we're going to have a type mismatch. So that, I think, is the end. Now, obviously you want to know about these for the exam, but also when you're programming, if you're using an IDE or if you're just using AI and it says, oh, it's a type mismatch or it's an overflow or, it's one of these, well, that's a pretty good time for you to think, oh, hang on, what do I know about that error? Because if you know what it's talking about, then you're in a much stronger position to fix it up. So I hope this has been useful to you.